Genshin Impact's 5.3 patch will have tons of great 5 stars to wish for, but with 11 different options to choose from, a lot of people are having trouble deciding who they want. That's why in this video we'll go over Mavuika, Citlali, Arlecchino, Clorinde, Baizhu, Shenhe, Keqing, Ganyu, Xiao, Tartaglia, and Qiqi's strengths, weaknesses, and pull value for your account. Since there are so many 5 stars to go over, I'll spend more time on Mavuika and Citlali because they're new, and then I'll go over the other 5-star rerun characters and tell you who is best for your account, and I think the results may not be what people expect. With that being said, if there's someone who you really want, then just wish for them. This guide is designed to help you figure out what these characters can do well and what they struggle with so you can best be prepared to play them at their maximum potential. Make sure to like this video if it helped, and share it with anyone who you think may be wondering who to wish for, and let's get started. Now let's talk about Mavuika, the Pyro Archon and Super Saiyan Biker. Mavuika is a pyro damage dealer with some support capabilities that can be played on or off field, but most of the time you'll just want to play her as an on-field damage dealer. Mavuika's elemental skill has 2 modes. The tap version summons a ring that does AoE pyro damage once every 2 seconds. The hold version makes her ride a motorcycle and use it to attack enemies with pyro damage that cannot be overridden by other elemental infusions. When she's on her bike, she can also deal pyro damage while sprinting. It's important to know that the talent damage while Mavuika is on her motorcycle is actually worse than her regular normal attacks, but this is by design because her elemental burst will greatly enhance their damage. Speaking of her elemental burst, it deals a ton of damage on its initial hit, and it also gives her motorcycle form an attack bonus based on fighting spirit. Rather than using energy, Mavuika gains fighting spirit whenever a character consumes Night Soul points and whenever a character does a normal attack. Mavuika's fighting spirit limit is 200, but you can use her elemental burst anytime you have 100 or more fighting spirits, but the more you have, the more damage she will deal. This is exactly why you want characters that consume Night Soul points rather quickly, because that way you can charge up her elemental burst very fast, and if you try to rely on characters using a lot of normal attacks, you might get some fighting spirit out of it, but it's really not that much compared to characters that are spending Night Soul quickly. Mavuika also has very high interruption resistance in her elemental burst, meaning that even though you will still take damage, enemies will not be knocking you around the arena. Her passive talents also focus on offense, giving her a 30% attack buff whenever you use a Night Soul burst, and Mavuika can permanently maintain this buff all by herself. Her final ascension passive increases the damage of the active character by up to 40% based on the amount of fighting spirit she has when she uses her elemental burst. To get the maximum value, you need 200 fighting spirit, and the damage bonus gradually weakens over 20 seconds. Mavuika has incredibly strong potential for damage, but her reliance on using characters that have the Night Soul mechanic make her quite limiting. So how does the Pyro Archon stack up against the competition, and is she worth your primogems? Mavuika's personal damage is great. She can clear entire waves of enemies with the first hit of her elemental burst, and she also has good AoE potential, combined with the ability to do damage off-field. The problem is that it can be slow because of the Night Soul mechanic. Without other characters that use Night Soul points, Mavuika's damage potential is still quite good, but it is considerably weaker than if you can consistently reach 200 fighting spirits. And while her off-field damage from her elemental skill is also good, it's not nearly as high as her on-field damage potential, which doesn't feel great if you really want to use her as a support for a character you really like playing, but she ends up dealing more damage than the character you want to play in the first place. Mavuika's support capability is good. Mavuika doesn't dethrone Xiangling as the off-field pyro damage queen, but she does offer good off-field AoE damage, a very strong elemental burst, even if you just use it for the massive initial damage, and a passive that increases your active character's damage. The problem with Mavuika as a support is that her on-field damage is just so much higher than many other characters, so that means it's often much better to play Mavuika as your on-field damage dealer and just build a team around her that supports her instead. Mavuika's team flexibility is okay. Mavuika's teams are harshly limited by her reliance on characters who consume Night Soul points, and while everyone can get Kachina for free, you'd still want another character on the team who uses Night Soul points to get the most out of Mavuika. She can be a decent off-field support for Kinich and Mualani, but her best teams will revolve around maximizing her damage. And since her charged attacks in her burst-enhanced motorcycle form do massive amounts of damage in a short amount of time, that means that characters like Xingqiu and Yelan are unfortunately not a good option for her. This is a shame because these limitations make her the least flexible Archon, although she still does well in a variety of teams, particularly with characters from Natlan. Mavuika's free-to-play friendliness is okay. She has some good free-to-play weapon options, including the Tidal Shadow and Earthshakers, both craftable 4-star claymores, but her best free-to-play weapon is the Mailed Flower, an event claymore that increases her elemental mastery and attack. While her free-to-play weapon options are good, it's really her lack of free-to-play friendly teams that holds her back, as most of her best teams will use multiple limited 5-stars with few substitutions for free-to-play players. Mavuika's overall value is good. Mavuika is a very strong damage dealer for anyone who pulls her, but her reliance on teammates who use the Night Soul mechanic greatly reduces her team flexibility and overall versatility. And because so much of her kit's power is focused on her personal damage, I can't recommend people use their hard-earned primogems to wish for her just to use her as a support. But if you have characters that consume Night Soul points already, particularly Xiaonin, then Mavuika will be a very powerful addition for anyone seeking an on-field damage dealer. Good teammates for Mavuika include Bennett, Chevreuse, Xiaonin, Citlali, Rosaria, Farina, Mualani, and Kinich. Next, we move on to the overly violent, pillow-loving grandma, Citlali. Citlali is a cryo-catalyst support whose main purpose is to create a shield while also buffing your team in a variety of ways. Citlali's elemental skill generates Night Soul points and creates a cryo shield that gets stronger the more elemental mastery she has. It also summons a little pillow monster that deals cryo AoE damage every second while applying the cryo element to enemies once every 2 seconds. The continuous AoE damage from her little pillow monster will last as long as she has Night Soul points. This shield is quite strong, and a well-invested Citlali will be able to make a shield that can absorb roughly 12,000 damage before it breaks, which is about 3/4 of most level 90 characters' maximum HP. This is nowhere near as strong as Zhongli's shield capabilities, but it's still very comfy. Citlali's elemental burst deals cryo damage once it's used, and then after a short delay it deals cryo damage once again. It also generates Night Soul points for her, making it easier to maintain the continuous AoE damage from her elemental skill. Citlali's first ascension passive decreases enemies' pyro or hydro resistance when 2 conditions are met. Firstly, Eats Papa, the little pillow monster from her elemental skill, must be active, and secondly, party members must trigger melt or freeze reactions. Triggering this passive will also grant Citlali 16 Night Soul points once every 8 seconds, which means you'll typically get 32 Night Soul points per rotation as it will trigger twice. This gives Citlali a lot of synergy with most Pyro and Hydro characters, and gives her extra ways to generate Night Soul points to ensure her off-field continuous cryo AoE damage remains active. Citlali's final ascension passive increases the damage of the little pillow monster from her elemental skill by a portion of her elemental mastery. And it also increases the damage of her elemental burst by a tremendous amount of her elemental mastery, making her burst quite a surprisingly strong nuke for a shield character, especially when it triggers melt. It also generates 4 Night Soul points when a character triggers a Night Soul burst, which will only happen once if Citlali is your only Night Soul character, but it can happen a few more times if you pair her with other Night Soul characters. Citlali also benefits from being able to buff the team outside of her kit. Using the Cinder City artifact set lets her increase your team's elemental damage, and giving her a Thrilling Tales of Dragonslayer's weapon can give one of your characters a massive attack boost. So how good is Citlali? Does she bring enough to warrant your primogems, or does this grandma belong in a retirement home? It's time to give Citlali a rating. Citlali's personal damage is okay. Normally, defensive support characters have very poor damage because their function is to protect the team more than it is to deal damage. But Citlali has the capability to do decent damage, especially with her elemental burst on a melt team. It's nowhere near as strong as a character whose kit is focused on doing damage, but it feels nice to see a strong hit from her burst every once in a while. Citlali's support capability is great! Citlali brings a lot to the table with her kit. Shielding, off-field cryo damage and application, an enemy pyro and hydro resistance shred, and she can also buff the team further thanks to the Cinder City artifact set and the Thrilling Tales of Dragonslayer's catalyst. She not only brings good defensive support that makes playing feel a lot more comfortable, but she also has the capability to improve your team's damage in a lot of different ways, making her great in a variety of situations. Citlali's team flexibility is good to great. Citlali's best teams will be melt teams with pyro characters, but that does not mean that she won't be good in plenty of other teams. Being a shield character who deals off-field damage and has plenty of ways to buff your team means that Citlali is often a good choice for support, even in non-optimal setups. She's also not an entirely premium support because she has a nice range of flexibility since she works well with 4-star characters like Gaming and Rosaria, as well as limited 5-star characters like Mavuika, Chaska, and Arlecchino. Citlali's free-to-play friendliness is great! Thrilling Tales of Dragonslayers is basically as good as her signature weapon for teams that have an attack scaling on-field damage dealer. And the Thrilling Tales of Dragonslayers is so much easier to get. Considering that she also pairs well with some free-to-play and 4-star characters, while also having the added utility of being a shield character, Citlali is a great defensive option that can still do some damage. So she brings a lot of value for free-to-play players that are looking for a defensive support that can also do a bit more. Citlali's overall value is good. While very nice, she isn't totally game-changing or particularly the best at anything. Her damage isn't amazing, she's not the best shielder, she's not the best Night Soul-based support, and she's not the best team buffer. But she is good enough at all of these roles and combines them in a unique way that makes her worthwhile for most players who want her. And I think players will really enjoy the comfy vibe she provides, not only with her shield, but also with all of the pillows that she uses for all of her abilities. Good teammates for Citlali include Gaming, Bennett, Arlecchino, Mavuika, Rosaria, Kaya, Shalonin, Chaska, Nuvolette, Risley in a freeze team, or just about anywhere you need a shield character. Now that we've spent some time on the new characters coming in patch 5.3, I want to go over the rerun characters as this version brings us a whopping 11 different 5 stars available to wish for. So I will quickly go through the other available 5 stars and let you know how good they are for your account. Arlecchino is an on-field pyro damage dealer and one of the strongest ones in Genshin Impact. Her kit seems very complicated at first, but in practice it's actually really easy to play. Just use her elemental skill, wait for the mark her skill applies to get bigger, then use a charged attack. You can also use a charge attack right away if your mark hits multiple enemies. Doing this will give Arlecchino a bond of life which prevents her from being healed by anything except her elemental burst, and her normal attacks gain a pyro infusion and a big damage bonus. Her elemental burst does a single instance of pyro damage, and it also heals her, with the heal being greater the more bond of life she has, and her elemental burst also resets the long cooldown of her elemental skill. Since Arlecchino's damage is tied to her bond of life and not an ability duration, she has a little bit more leeway with her rotations, and since her damage is also very front-loaded, she works well against waves of enemies, and also when you need to defeat enemies relatively fast. The biggest downside to Arlecchino is that she cannot be healed in combat except by her elemental burst, so it can feel risky to play her without a shield or other defensive support. Arlecchino works very well in a variety of teams like Vaporize, Reverse Melt, Chevreuse Overloaded, Mono Pyro, and more. She's pretty free-to-play friendly, making good use out of the free-to-play Spear, the White Tassels, and even working well with many different 4-star characters. Overall, I would say Arlecchino's pull value is medium-high to high. For reference, I rate Mavuika as having medium pull value and Citlali as having medium-high pull value. If you need a good damage dealer, she's a great choice, but on-field damage dealers are the most easily replaceable characters in the game. The main annoyance that people will find with her is just how her bond of life works and how she really appreciates a shield, but considering that Lanyan is also on her banner and available for free during Lantern Rite, this is a good time to get Arlecchino if you want her. The next character on the list is Clorinde. She is an electro sword-wielding on-field damage dealer that's also another Bond of Life character, meaning that Clorinde cannot be healed outside of her own mechanics, but that's not really much of an issue when playing her. Clorinde uses her elemental burst to give her a high amount of Bond of Life, and then uses her elemental skill to enter a special state where she does a bunch of fast, electrified pistol shots. Tapping her elemental skill again in her elemental skill state will make Clorinde lunge forward, consuming her Bond of Life and dealing electro damage and healing her with a damage bonus based on how much Bond of Life she used. Generally, after using her elemental skill, you use 3 normal attacks and then tap her skill again for the sword lunge and then repeat. Clorinde's damage numbers don't seem very high, but she does attack very fast, and with strong supports like Furina and Nahida, she can quickly tear through enemies. One of the biggest downsides of Clorinde is that she's an on-field damage dealer competing with so many other great on-field damage dealers that she doesn't often stand out. Even though characters like Furina make Clorinde feel very strong, Furina will make a character whose base kit is stronger than Clorinde's even better, so at that point, Clorinde will just feel like she falls behind even further. Still, Clorinde is a solid choice for a damage dealer, but far from the best in the game. She's really fun to play, and best for people who want her, not for those who are looking for the strongest characters possible. For these reasons, she has a medium pull value. Next is Baizhu, the Dendro healer from Liyue. Baizhu is a Dendro Catalyst user whose elemental skill heals the entire team, and whose elemental burst creates a very weak shield that is designed to break, heal you, and then refresh after a few seconds. The healing provided by Baiju's skill is very nice for Furina teams, and his elemental burst providing some interruption resistance is really nice for Neuvillette. But his poor Dendro application does hold him back because of how strong Dendro reactions are. Baizhu is also comparable to Yao Yao, a 4-star Dendro healer that can be substituted for him in virtually any team. Baizhu of course offers more, but not enough in my opinion if you want a Dendro healer, especially when you can choose to get a 4-star healer like Yao Yao for free during Lantern Rite. For these reasons, Baizhu has a medium pull value. He's very useful, but if a 4-star you can get for free can do a similar job, his value drops significantly. Next is Shenhe, a cryo polearm character that no one ever thought would get another rerun. Shenhe is a character that buffs cryo damage. Her elemental skill will buff several instances of cryo damage for your party based on her attack, and her elemental burst shreds cryo resistance. Shenhe wants to be built with very high attack to maximize her buffs, but her personal damage is actually really bad because her talent multipliers are very low. Shenhe really is a premium support that is best for Ayaka. Other cryo damage dealers like Wriothesley would actually appreciate someone like Citlali more than they would Shenhe. For these reasons, Shenhe's pull value is low, because a character like Citlali provides both offensive and defensive buffs for the teams that Shenhe works well in. But if you've been waiting for over a year to pull Shenhe because you like her, then don't let her limited usability stop you. Keqing is the next 5-star on the list, and honestly, she's just here so you can lose the Chronicled Wish 50/50 to a standard 5-star character. Keqing isn't bad, especially with Dendro teams, but there are far better Electro characters, and you have multiple avenues of getting Keqing, including the standard banner, the free 5-star selector during Genshin's anniversary, or the unfortunate case of losing a 50/50. For these reasons, Keqing's pull value is low, and I would not recommend trying to wish for her. Ganyu is a cryo bow-wielding character and another damage dealer coming in patch 5.3, and she's a solid cryo damage dealer, but she's far from being as powerful of a damage dealer as Arlecchino or Mavuika. Mavuika does make Ganyu's aim shot melt teams feel a lot better, since it's pretty annoying to play Ganyu melt with Xiangling, and Citlali is also okay with her, but the Coco Goat really hasn't received much since she first launched. Her elemental burst is great when you can group up multiple enemies, but this poor goat could use a bit more love. For these reasons, Ganyu has a medium pull value, not bad, but also far from the best 5-star you can choose. Next is Xiao, one of Liwei's original big three, and while his rankings among the top damage dealers once plunged about as much as he does, Xiao has received a lot of support and that makes him much stronger. The angsty Animo Pogo Stick Boy can dish out massive damage with his plunge attacks when enhanced by Farazan, Farina, Bennett, and Cloud Retainer. Of the Chronicled Wish characters, Xiao is one of the strongest picks, however, he is not very free-to-play friendly, and he needs more investment than many other characters in this patch. For these reasons, Xiao's pull value is medium. He's a good damage dealer with tons of great options for supports, but if you don't have those supports already, and don't have a powerful weapon for him, you'll probably be chasing those things for a long time. Tartaglia is the next 5-star on the list, and while people don't talk about him too much anymore, he's still quite strong. He basically has one team, and that's him plus Bennett, Xiongling, and Kazuha. He can of course be played in a bunch of different other teams, but this is his strongest one. Tartaglia's ability to apply lots of Hydro in an AoE in tight-knit groups of enemies makes him very fun to play in certain situations, but the skill involved to play him without extending his skill cooldown beyond necessary, while also managing all of your buffs and your team's abilities and your positioning, can be more of a hassle than most players want to deal with. And because lining up all of the buffs and doing the rotations properly and getting the right positioning can require more strict management than other characters, he can be a real pain to play on mobile or with high ping. For these reasons, Tartaglia has medium pull value. He does really well in certain situations, but he doesn't feel great to play in the overworld. He's not a bad character, but he's really only best to pull for if you really like him. The final 5-star we have is Qiqi. No, don't get her. Qiqi heals quite a lot, but she also has a very long cooldown on her elemental skill, and her elemental burst costs 80 energy, and she doesn't generate any cryo particles, which is absolutely unacceptable for a 5-star. Besides those problems with her own kit, Qiqi doesn't bring any utility to the team outside of healing, and because you can get Qiqi from the standard banner, from the anniversary 5-star selector, or by losing a 50-50, her pull value is low. She's really just on the Chronicled Wish banner, so if you accidentally get her, you feel compelled to pull more. So with all of the ratings, who is best? Well, if you need a damage dealer, then Mavuika and Arlecchino are the best choices. But I don't recommend pulling Mavuika unless you have Xilonen or plan to get Citlali, as well as Xilonen on a rerun. Mavuika honestly just feels too limited, needing teammates who consume Night Soul points, and if Kachina is the only character you have that does that, I would recommend skipping Mavuika. Arlecchino is a much more versatile on-field damage dealer who hits really hard and is pretty easy to play, and I would rate Arlecchino as the highest pull value for a damage dealer this patch, especially if you don't have teammates for Mavuika, namely Xilonen or Citlali. And speaking of Citlali, I would say that she is the best support character you can get this patch. She's not the strongest support, but she does offer a lot, and despite her best teams being melt teams, she works well in a variety of teams and in quite a few free-to-play friendly setups. So while Mavuika and Arlecchino may be much better for damage, Citlali has pretty high value for comfort combined with her overall usefulness, so if you don't need a damage dealer, Citlali is a solid choice. The other 5-stars this patch are also decent for your counts, well, except for Keqing and Qiqi, but they fall more into the realm of I want this character because I like them and not I want this character because they are just so broken. Any of these other 5-stars coming on the Chronicled Wish banner can clear content and they're far from unusable, but if your resources are limited, you may want to consider someone else. That'll be it for this video, everyone. I hope it helped. I hope you had a lovely holiday. I plan to make more videos about the characters coming in patch 5.3 since we also have a lot of Lantern Rite characters coming from the 4-star selector, so make sure that you're subbed for that. Stay awesome, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.